The worst thing about heartbreak isn't the lie. It's hearing the truth in the voice of the person you love. The chandelier lights above the Romano Foundation ballroom blurred into gold streaks as I stood frozen behind the half-open office door. One hand tightening around the silver tray I'd been carrying all night. Laughter drifted through the marble hallway. Crystal glasses clinked softly somewhere behind me. Manhattan glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows like a kingdom built for people richer and colder than me. And then I heard my husband laugh quietly. "Evelyn is useful," Adrian said without hesitation, his deep voice calm enough to cut straight through my chest. "But she'll never be my real wife." For a second, I honestly thought I had imagined it. My breathing stopped. The tray trembled in my hands hard enough for the champagne flutes to rattle softly together. Inside the office, several men chuckled under their breath like he'd made a clever joke instead of dismantling someone's heart with a single sentence. "You've been married almost 2 years, another man said. People expected an heir by now. Adrian exhaled slowly. I could picture him perfectly without even looking. Black tuxedo, silver watch, one hand resting in his pocket like nothing in this world could shake him. "A contract is a contract," he replied. "Let's not confuse business with love." Something inside me went painfully quiet after that. Not shattered, not dramatic, just quiet, like a candle finally giving up after fighting the wind too long. I stepped backward before anyone could see me standing there. My heels sank into the thick ivory carpet as I turned toward the empty hallway, trying to breathe normally, trying to keep my face composed because rich people noticed everything at these events, especially weakness. My reflection caught briefly in one of the gold-framed mirrors lining the corridor. White silk gown, diamond earrings Adrian had bought me for Christmas, hair pinned perfectly into place. From the outside, I looked exactly like the wife of New York's most untouchable man. But suddenly I felt 24 again. Small, temporary, replaceable. I moved toward the terrace. Doors before the tears could reach my eyes. Cold October air wrapped around me the second I stepped outside. The city smelled like rain and expensive cigars and traffic below. Somewhere downtown, a siren echoed through the night. I gripped the stone balcony so hard my fingers hurt. Useful. The word replayed in my head over and over. Not loved. Not chosen. Useful. Behind me, the ballroom doors opened. I wiped my face quickly before turning around, but it was already him. Adrian Moretti stood beneath the warm golden light spilling from inside, one hand adjusting the cuff of his tailored black jacket. At 34, he looked exactly like the rumors people whispered about him at charity galas and political dinners. Dangerous. Controlled. Untouchable. His dark eyes landed on me instantly. Sharp. Observant. "There you are," he said quietly. "People are looking for us." The irony almost made me laugh. I studied his face carefully, wondering if guilt would appear there. It didn't. He looked calm, beautiful, completely unaware that 10 minutes earlier, he had destroyed something he never even realized I was still trying to protect. My voice surprised even me when I finally answered. Soft. Steady. "I just needed some air." Adrian stepped closer, slipping his expensive coat over my shoulders automatically when the wind picked up. The gesture was gentle, familiar, practiced. That almost hurt worse. Because even now, standing inches away from the man I married, I suddenly realized something terrifying. I had no idea whether Adrian Moretti actually had a heart, or if I had simply spent 2 years loving the illusion of one. The drive home took 23 minutes, and Adrian did not speak for 22 of them. Rain tapped softly against the windows of the black Mercedes, while Manhattan lights slid across the glass like fading ghosts. I sat beside him in silence, staring at my wedding ring resting against the leather seat between us. I had taken it off without thinking somewhere between Park Avenue and 57th Street. Adrian noticed, of course. He noticed everything. He just chose what mattered to him. "You forgot this," he said finally, his eyes still fixed on the road. His voice sounded calm, smooth, untouched by the damage he had done earlier that night. I picked the ring up slowly and slipped it back onto my finger because I did not have the energy to explain why wearing it suddenly felt dishonest. Outside, the city blurred under silver rain. Inside, the silence between us felt larger than the entire car. The penthouse overlooking Central Park was exactly 72 degrees when we walked in. Soft jazz played automatically through hidden speakers. Warm amber lights reflected against marble floors polished so perfectly they looked untouched by human life. Everything in Adrian's world was controlled. Temperature, lighting, security, reputation, emotions, especially emotions. I slipped off my heels near the staircase and moved toward the kitchen without looking at him. My feet hurt. My chest hurt worse. "You should have eaten more tonight," Adrian said behind me while loosening his tie. "You barely touched your plate." I almost laughed at the absurdity of it. He could notice untouched sea bass across a ballroom but not the woman quietly breaking beside him. I was not hungry. He nodded once. "Tell Sophia to make you breakfast tomorrow. You looked pale tonight." There it was again. Care disguised as management. Kindness filtered through obligation. Adrian never forgot my coffee order. Never forgot my doctor appointments. Never forgot to send flowers on birthdays or holidays. But love? Love was the one thing he guarded from me like it was classified information. I opened the refrigerator mostly to avoid looking at him. Cold white light spilled across the kitchen island. "Did the meeting with the investors go well?" I asked softly because pretending had become muscle memory in this marriage. Adrian stepped closer, setting his phone on the counter beside me. "The deal is done. Congratulations. You sound tired." I closed the refrigerator without taking anything out. "Long night." His gaze settled on me carefully then. Too carefully. "Evelyn." Just hearing my name in that low voice used to make my heartbeat stumble. Now it only made me wonder how many versions of himself existed behind those dark eyes. What? Did something happen tonight? For one dangerous second I thought about telling him. I imagined looking directly into his face and repeating every word I heard outside that office door. Useful. Contract. Never my real wife. But then what? Adrian Moretti negotiated billion-dollar deals without blinking. Men twice his age feared disappointing him. He would not suddenly become emotionally honest because I admitted my feelings were hurt. So instead I smiled. God, I hated how easy that smile came now. Nothing happened. His expression remained unreadable for another moment before he nodded slowly. "You should sleep." Sleep. Like my heart had not been rearranged 3 hours earlier. Adrian moved toward the staircase, rolling the sleeves of his white dress shirt back slightly as he walked. Beautiful. Untouchable. Entirely composed. Halfway up the stairs he stopped unexpectedly and looked back at me. "You know I would never let anything happen to you, right?" The words landed strangely after tonight. Protective. Sincere even. But protection was not the same thing as love. I looked at the man standing above me beneath the warm penthouse lights and realized something almost unbearable. Adrian Moretti knew how to keep me safe from the entire world. He just did not know how to keep me safe from him. The first thing I stopped doing was waiting for him at night. Adrian noticed it 3 days later. Before that, no matter how late he came home, I always stayed awake with the lamp on beside the couch overlooking Central Park. Sometimes I read. Sometimes I pretended to. Mostly I just listened for the sound of the elevator opening into the penthouse because despite everything, some part of me still relaxed the second I knew he was home safe. But after the gala, I started going upstairs at 10:30 exactly. No exceptions. No waiting. No soft music playing in the background. No untouched cup of tea cooling beside me. The first night he came home after midnight, I heard his footsteps pause downstairs longer than usual. Drawers opened. Cabinets closed. Silence stretched through the penthouse like fog. Then eventually slow footsteps climbed the stairs toward our bedroom. Our bedroom. The phrase almost felt dishonest now. Adrian slept on the left side of the bed. I slept on the right. There was always exactly 12 inches of untouched space between us every night, like an invisible line neither of us crossed. That night I kept my eyes closed when he walked in. The room darkened briefly as he loosened his tie near the window. "You are awake," he said quietly. It was not a question. I was trying to sleep. A pause. "You usually wait downstairs." I stared at the faint city lights bleeding through the curtains. I was tired. More silence followed. Adrian moved around the room with controlled precision, setting his watch down beside the dresser, unbuttoning his cufflinks, placing everything exactly where it belonged. The strange thing about loving a man like Adrian Moretti was that you learned his silences better than most people learned words. This silence meant confusion. "Did I do something wrong?" he asked finally. The question caught me off guard so badly my throat tightened. Adrian almost never asked emotional questions because emotions were unpredictable, and he hated unpredictable things. Slowly I turned toward him. He stood near the bed in a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled halfway up his forearms, dark hair slightly messy for once, exhaustion shadowing the sharp lines of his face. Beautiful. Cold. Mine technically. And somehow still impossibly far away. "No," I lied softly. "Then why does this house feel different?" "Because you broke something in me and did not even realize it. Because I heard the truth when you thought I was not listening. Because I spent 2 years loving a man who only married me for strategy and appearances and convenience. Instead, I pulled the blanket closer around myself and whispered, 'You are imagining things.'" Adrian watched me for a long moment. His dark eyes narrowed slightly like he was trying to solve a problem that refused to make sense. Then finally he nodded once and disappeared into the bathroom. I heard water running a few minutes later. I closed my eyes hard enough to ache. The next morning I stopped fixing his ties before meetings. It sounds small, stupid even, but every morning for nearly 2 years, Adrian stood silently in front of the mirror, while I adjusted silk ties against expensive white collars, because somehow that tiny ritual became ours. The first morning I walked past him without stopping, he actually turned around. "Evelyn." I paused near the bedroom door. "What?" He held the dark blue tie loosely in one hand. "You forgot." Forgot. Like kindness was a scheduled responsibility. Slowly, I looked at him standing there in a charcoal suit worth more than my first apartment and realized something painful. Adrian truly did not understand the difference between routine and affection. "You can do it yourself," I said gently. Not cruelly. Somehow that made it worse. His expression shifted almost imperceptibly. Confusion again. Maybe irritation. Maybe something else he did not know how to name. But I walked away before I could study it too closely, because if there was one thing more dangerous than loving Adrian Moretti, it was starting to believe he might finally notice me only after I had already begun disappearing. 2 weeks after the gala, I realized grief could exist quietly inside a marriage without anyone else noticing. To the outside world, Adrian and I still looked perfect. We attended charity dinners together, smiled for photographs together, sat beside each other at long polished tables while powerful men discussed politics and investments over expensive whiskey. The newspapers called us Manhattan royalty. Women online analyzed my dresses and jewelry like fairy tales. None of them knew I had stopped touching my husband unless absolutely necessary. None of them knew the space between us in bed had somehow grown larger than the Atlantic Ocean. It happened slowly after that. Small things. Tiny fractures. Adrian began coming home earlier, though he never mentioned it directly. I would find him standing silently in the kitchen at 8 in the evening instead of midnight, loosening his tie while watching me read near the windows, like he expected something that no longer happened. One Thursday night, he walked into the penthouse carrying white roses. My favorite. He stopped when he saw me sitting at the dining table, surrounded by paperwork and travel brochures. "What is this?" he asked carefully. I looked up from the brochure for a small publishing internship in Boston. "Nothing important." Adrian set the roses down slowly. "You hate Boston." I almost smiled at that because it meant he remembered at least one real thing about me. "I used to." He studied the brochures for another second. "Are you planning a trip?" "Maybe." Silence settled between us again. Adrian removed his watch, placing it carefully on the marble countertop. "For how long?" "I do not know yet." His jaw tightened slightly, barely noticeable unless you knew him as well as I did. "You usually tell me these things first." I folded the brochure closed. "You usually do not care where I go." That finally made him look directly at me. The room suddenly felt colder despite the soft jazz floating through hidden speakers overhead. "That is not true." "Is it not?" Adrian took one slow step closer. "Evelyn." My name sounded different tonight. Less controlled. More careful. But I was too tired to untangle hope from disappointment anymore. Before I could answer, The elevator doors opened behind him. Sophia Loren stepped into the penthouse like she belonged there. Tall, elegant, silver blonde hair falling perfectly over one shoulder. She wore a fitted black coat and carried herself with the effortless confidence of a woman accustomed to expensive rooms and dangerous men. I recognized her immediately from magazines and whispered conversations at galas. Sophia Loren, daughter of a French diplomat, former fiancé rumors. The woman everyone once assumed Adrian Moretti would marry. Her eyes landed on me briefly before softening into a polished smile. Evelyn, she greeted warmly. It has been too long. Too long implied there had once been closeness between us. There had not. We had met exactly twice. Adrian's expression hardened almost immediately. What are you doing here? Sophia removed her gloves slowly. Straight to business. Some things never change. The familiarity in her voice twisted painfully somewhere beneath my ribs. Adrian moved toward her automatically, taking the folder she carried before she even asked. Small gestures. Instinctive ones. My chest tightened. That was the problem with emotional betrayal. It was never one giant moment. It was 1,000 tiny realizations arriving all at once. Sophia glanced between us, sensing tension immediately because women always notice these things faster than men do. Should I come back another time? No, Adrian answered too quickly. It is fine. Fine. I stood slowly from the table, smoothing invisible wrinkles from my sweater while forcing calm into my expression. I was just heading upstairs anyway. Adrian looked toward me immediately. Evelyn. But I was already walking away because suddenly I understood everything with terrifying clarity. The city had always assumed Adrian Moretti belonged beside a woman like Sophia Loren. Elegant, powerful, untouchable, someone who fit his world naturally. And me? I was simply the woman who signed the contract first. 3 days later, I booked a one-way flight to Boston at 2:13 in the morning while Adrian slept beside me. The glow from my laptop illuminated the dark bedroom in soft blue light, while rain drifted against the penthouse windows. October storms always made Manhattan look lonely from above. I sat curled near the edge of the bed wearing one of Adrian's old sweaters, listening to the slow rhythm of his breathing behind me while my finger hovered over the purchase button. One way. The words felt terrifying. Permanent. Freeing. Sad. I clicked confirm before I could change my mind. The confirmation email arrived instantly. Logan International Airport. Monday. 7:45 a.m. I stared at the screen for a long time afterward, my heartbeat strangely calm. Maybe because deep down I had already been leaving him for weeks. Adrian shifted slightly behind me. Evelyn. His voice sounded rough with sleep. I froze immediately. What time is it? Late, I whispered, closing the laptop carefully. He sat up slowly, dark hair messy, white sheets falling around his waist while sleep still shadowed his sharp features. There was something dangerously human about Adrian when he first woke up. Softer around the edges. Less untouchable. His eyes settled on my face instantly. Why? Are you awake? I shrugged lightly. Could not sleep. Adrian studied me in silence. Even half asleep, his instincts never rested. Come here. 2 simple words. Quiet. Familiar. Once they would have melted me completely. Tonight they only made my chest ache. Still, I set the laptop aside and moved closer because habit was difficult to kill. Adrian reached for me automatically, one arm wrapping around my waist while pulling me gently against his chest. Warmth surrounded me immediately. Expensive cologne. Cotton sheets. The steady heartbeat beneath his skin. For a dangerous second, I almost let myself forget everything again. You have been distant lately, he murmured softly into my hair. I stared at the city lights beyond the windows. Have I? Yes. There was no accusation in his voice. Only confusion. That somehow hurt worse. Adrian rested his chin lightly against my head. Did Sophia say something to upset you? I nearly laughed at the irony. He still thought this was about another woman instead of the damage he created himself. No. Then tell me what this is. This. Like emotions could be solved through negotiation if he gathered enough information first. I closed my eyes briefly. I am just tired. Adrian's fingers tightened slightly at my waist. You keep saying that. Because the truth would ruin us. Silence stretched between us again. Then quietly, almost reluctantly, he said, "I do not like when you pull away from me." My throat tightened unexpectedly. Not because the words were romantic. Adrian Moretti did not speak romance fluently, but because he sounded genuinely unsettled by it. Like the distance bothered him in ways he could not fully understand. Slowly I turned toward him. His dark eyes searched mine carefully in the dim light. Beautiful eyes. Dangerous eyes. Eyes that had watched me fall in love with him while offering nothing truly safe in return. "Why?" I asked softly. Adrian frowned slightly. "What do you mean? Why does it bother you?" He opened his mouth immediately, then stopped. For the first time since I had known him, Adrian looked caught off guard by a simple emotional question. His hand remained against my waist, warm and steady, but uncertainty flickered briefly across his face. Tiny, barely visible, still there. "Because you are my wife," he answered finally. Not because he loved me. Not because he could not imagine life without me. Because I was his wife. A role. A title. Something belonging inside the carefully controlled structure of his world. I smiled softly despite the pain climbing through my chest because suddenly everything became painfully clear. Adrian Moretti cared about losing me the same way powerful men cared about losing anything valuable. He simply had not realized yet that hearts could leave long before bodies did. Monday arrived cold and gray. The kind of New York morning that smelled like rain before the first drop even touched the pavement. I woke up before sunrise to the quiet hum of the city beneath the penthouse windows and stared at the ceiling for a long time, listening to Adrian breathe beside me. He had come home after 2 in the morning from some meeting in Brooklyn. I heard him moving around quietly in the dark before slipping into bed beside me like he always did. Careful not to wake me. Careful in every way except the ones that actually mattered. My flight left in 4 hours. The suitcase hidden in the back of my closet suddenly felt heavier than anything I had ever owned. I turned my head slowly. Adrian slept on his back, one arm resting beside him, dark hair slightly disheveled against the pillow. Even asleep he looked controlled somehow, like discipline had settled permanently into his bones. A man built from sharp edges and expensive secrets. And somehow, despite everything, my chest still hurt when I looked at him. That was the cruel thing about love. Sometimes it stayed alive long after hope died. Quietly, I slipped out of bed and moved toward the bathroom before I lost my nerve. The marble floor felt freezing beneath my bare feet. I showered quickly, dressed in silence, then stood in front of the mirror staring at myself while fastening small pearl earrings with trembling fingers. 27 years old. Married. Lonely. Somewhere downstairs, the coffee machine started automatically at 6:30 exactly because Adrian likes schedules and systems and routines. I walked into the closet and pulled the hidden suitcase forward slowly. My passport sat tucked inside beside the Boston ticket confirmation, and a folded acceptance letter for the publishing internship. A new life. Smaller apartment. Smaller city. Smaller loneliness, hopefully. I zipped the suitcase shut quietly and nearly jumped when Adrian's voice filled the doorway behind me. "Why are you packing?" My entire body froze. Slowly I turned around. Adrian stood there wearing dark gray sweatpants and a black t-shirt, sleep still roughening his voice. But his eyes were fully awake now, focused entirely on the suitcase beside me. "Evelyn." His tone sharpened slightly. "Answer me." I swallowed carefully. "I am leaving for a few days." Silence. Dangerous silence. Adrian stepped fully into the closet, gaze never leaving my face. "Where?" "Boston." His expression darkened immediately. "Why?" "Because staying here is destroying me slowly. Because I cannot survive another year loving someone who only sees me as part of a contract. Because hearing your voice in my head every night has become unbearable. I need space," I whispered instead. Adrian stared at me like I had spoken another language entirely. "Space." He repeated the word slowly, unfamiliar with it somehow. "From me." I nodded once. Something cold flickered behind his eyes then. Not anger exactly. Something deeper. More unstable. Adrian took another step closer. "Who put this idea in your head?" The question stunned me. "Nobody." "Sophia." My breath caught sharply. Even now, he thought this was about another person manipulating me instead of my own heartbreak. This is not about her. Then what is this about? His voice rose slightly for the first time since I had known him. Not yelling. Adrian Moretti never yelled. But tension rolled off him so heavily the air itself felt tight. I do not understand what is happening to you lately. The sadness that hit me then was almost unbearable. Because he really did not understand. Not even now. I looked at the man standing in front of me beneath soft closet lighting and realized something devastating. Adrian had memorized every detail about my life. Except the parts connected to my heart. That is the problem, I whispered. His jaw tightened immediately. What does that mean? I looked down at the wedding ring on my finger for one long second before meeting his eyes again. You only notice me when you think you are losing me. And for the first time since our marriage began, Adrian Moretti looked genuinely afraid. Adrian did not speak for a long time after that. The silence inside the closet pressed against my chest until breathing felt difficult. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan disappeared beneath sheets of gray rain, while somewhere downstairs the coffee machine clicked off automatically. 7 years ago, before I met Adrian, silence used to feel peaceful to me. Now it felt like standing beside something dangerous and waiting to see if it would finally explode. Adrian's dark eyes stayed locked on mine with an intensity that made my pulse stumble. You think I only care now because you are leaving, he said finally, his voice low and controlled. Is that really what you believe? I looked away first because the truth was exhausting. I do not know what to believe anymore. He stepped closer immediately. Then ask me. I almost laughed. Ask him what? Whether he loved me. Whether our marriage had ever meant anything beyond strategy and appearances in business alliances. Men like Adrian Moretti did not survive their world by speaking honestly about feelings. They survived by controlling them until nothing soft remained. Evelyn. My name sounded rougher this time. Look at me. Slowly I did. Adrian's expression had changed somehow. Less composed. Less untouchable. The carefully polished mask he wore for the rest of the world seemed thinner this morning. I know I am not good at this, he admitted quietly. The confession stunned me enough to stay silent. Adrian exhaled slowly, running one hand through his dark hair in visible frustration. But you cannot disappear without talking to me first. I tried talking to you, I whispered. For 2 years. His jaw tightened immediately. That is not fair. No. My voice shook despite my effort to stay calm. You wanted a wife who fit beside you at dinners and galas and photographs. And I tried, Adrian. God, I tried so hard to be enough for you. Something painful flickered across his face then. Fast. Gone almost instantly. You are enough. The words hit me harder than they should have because part of me still wanted desperately to hear them. But timing mattered. Truth mattered. And some words arrived too late to heal what had already broken. I shook my head slowly. Not in the ways that mattered. Adrian stared at me in silence before suddenly reaching toward the suitcase beside me. I stepped back instinctively. Do not. His eyes flashed immediately at the fear in my voice. Not anger. Hurt. Actual hurt. Adrian slowly removed his hand from the suitcase like he had just realized I thought he might stop me physically. I would never force you to stay, he said quietly. Shame twisted through my chest because I knew he was telling the truth. Adrian could be cold. Emotionally unreachable, brutally controlled, but never cruel in that way. Never unsafe. I know, I whispered. He looked exhausted suddenly. Not physically. Something deeper than that. Like the ground beneath him had shifted, and he still did not understand why. Then why does this feel like you are saying goodbye? 'Cause maybe I was. The realization settled heavily between us before I could answer. Adrian's gaze dropped briefly to my left hand. To the wedding ring still resting there. Slowly, carefully, he stepped closer again until only inches separated us. Take the trip if you need to, he said softly. Go to Boston for a few days. Clear your head. Hope flickered painfully in my chest before his next words destroyed it completely. But this marriage is still real, Evelyn. Real. My throat tightened instantly because suddenly I heard his voice again from that office at the gala. She will never be my real wife. Adrian must have seen the change in my face because confusion crossed his expression immediately. What? I looked at him for one long second. Really looked at him. At the man I loved enough to destroy myself over. Then finally, quietly, I asked the question that had been bleeding inside me for weeks. If this marriage is real now, I whispered. Then what was I when you said I never would be? And for the first time since I had known Adrian Moretti, he looked like a man who understood exactly how badly he had wounded someone he could no longer bear to lose. The color drained from Adrian's face so slowly it almost frightened me more than anger would have. For a moment he just stood there in complete silence while rain tapped softly against the penthouse windows behind us. Manhattan blurred gray beyond the glass. Cold. Distant. Untouchable. Just like him. You heard that. It was not a question. His voice sounded lower now, rough around the edges in a way I had never heard before. I folded my arms tightly across my chest because suddenly I felt exhausted down to my bones. At the gala, I whispered. Outside your office. Adrian closed his eyes briefly. 1 second. Maybe 2. When he looked at me again, something inside his expression had shifted completely. The composure was still there but cracked now. Human. Evelyn. The way he said my name this time nearly broke me. Not controlled. Not polished. Just regret. Raw and immediate. I looked away before I could weaken. Do not, I said softly. Please do not suddenly become gentle now because you realized I finally heard the truth. That was not the truth. I laughed quietly then, and the sound hurt both of us. Adrian, I heard the words myself. He moved closer immediately. You heard one sentence in the middle of a conversation you did not understand. Then explain it to me. Silence. Adrian looked down briefly like he was choosing between honesty and instinct, and for the first time in our marriage, honesty seemed to win. The men in that room were asking questions about heirs, he said quietly. About loyalty. About whether our marriage affected business decisions. I stayed silent. Adrian exhaled slowly. In my world, love is considered weakness. So you denied me. I protected you. My eyes snapped back to his instantly. By humiliating me? Pain flashed across his face immediately. Real pain. I did not know you were there. That does not make it better. Adrian went still after that. Completely still. The silence between us stretched painfully wide until finally he said the one thing I never expected to hear from him. You are right. My heartbeat stumbled. Adrian swallowed hard. His gaze fixed somewhere over my shoulder now. I spent so long treating emotions like liabilities that I forgot words could destroy people too. I stared at him in shock because Adrian Moretti never admitted fault easily. Men feared him because certainty radiated from him like armor. But standing here now, he suddenly looked like a man watching his entire life slip through his hands one mistake at a time. When I married you, he continued quietly, I told myself it was strategic. Safer that way. My throat tightened painfully. Adrian looked at me fully again. But somewhere along the way, you became the first thing I looked for every night when I came home. I wanted to resist him. God, I wanted to. But his voice sounded dangerously sincere now. You remember the lamp beside the couch? He asked softly. I nodded before I could stop myself. When it stopped being there, I could not sleep properly. My chest ached so badly I pressed one hand against it instinctively. Adrian stepped closer carefully, like I might disappear if he moved too fast. When you stopped fixing my ties in the morning, I stood in front of that mirror for 10 minutes the first day because I realized I did not know how to start my mornings without you anymore. Tears burned behind my eyes instantly. Adrian, I know I failed you. His voice cracked slightly on the last word, and hearing that nearly destroyed me because powerful men were not supposed to sound broken. I know I made you feel unwanted. He looked down briefly before whispering, but you were never temporary to me, Evelyn. Silence filled the closet again. Heavy. Emotional. Dangerous in an entirely different way now. Adrian slowly reached toward me, stopping just short of touching my face like he was asking permission without words. I do not know how to fix this yet, he admitted quietly. But if you walk out that door today without hearing anything else from me, then at least know this. His dark eyes locked onto mine with terrifying honesty. You became my real wife. Long before I understood what that actually meant. 3 months later, snow covered Boston like a fresh start I still was not sure I deserved. The bookstore cafe smelled like cinnamon and coffee beans while soft jazz drifted through hidden ceiling speakers overhead. Outside the frosted windows, people hurried through the cold wrapped in scarves and heavy coats, their breath turning white beneath the pale December sky. It was quieter here than Manhattan. Smaller. Kinder somehow. Nobody looked twice at me when I walked down the street. Nobody whispered my husband's last name behind my back. Nobody expected perfection. I had almost learned how to breathe normally again. Almost. You missed a spot. I looked up from the stack of books in my hands to find my coworker Jenna smiling at me from behind the register. You have flour on your cheek. I laughed softly and wiped at my face with the sleeve of my sweater. Occupational hazard. Long night. Something like that. It had been long nights for weeks now. Not because of work. Because Adrian would not stop trying. Not aggressively. Not possessively. Quietly. Consistently. Every Friday morning, flowers arrived at my apartment with no note attached because he knew I hated dramatic apologies. Every Sunday evening, a black town car parked across the street from the bookstore for exactly 20 minutes before leaving again. He never came inside. Never forced conversations. Just stayed close enough for me to know he was there. Watching. Waiting. Learning patience for the first time in his life. The first month I ignored it. The second month it became harder. Because Adrian had changed in ways I never expected. He called instead of commanding. Listened instead of controlling. Asked instead of assuming. Sometimes we spoke for 5 minutes. Sometimes for an hour. Once, he stayed on the phone silently while I cried after a difficult day because neither of us knew what else to say. He never mentioned returning to New York again after that. Around 6 that evening, snow began falling harder outside the windows. Jenna glanced toward the street suddenly before smirking. Your extremely handsome problem is back. My heartbeat betrayed me instantly. Slowly I looked outside. Adrian stood across the street beneath falling snow wearing a dark wool coat with his hands in his pockets, cold wind pushing through his dark hair. Manhattan had always made him look untouchable. Boston somehow made him look lonely instead. He has been standing there for 30 minutes, Jenna added quietly. That man looks at you like you hung the moon. My throat tightened painfully because 3 months ago, I would have traded anything to hear those words. I stepped outside before I could overthink it. Cold air wrapped around me immediately. Snowflakes melted softly against my coat as Adrian lifted his eyes toward me. God, even now seeing him still hurt. You should not stand out here in this weather, I said softly. Adrian's mouth curved slightly. You used to say that when I forgot my umbrella. Small memories. Tiny things. Somehow those always affected him most now. Silence settled gently between us while snow drifted around the city in soft white waves. Adrian finally stepped closer. His expression calmer than I had ever seen it before. Less guarded. More human. I found something, he said quietly. From his coat pocket, he pulled out a small velvet box. My chest tightened immediately. Adrian. It is not what you think. Slowly he opened the box. Inside rested my original engagement ring. The simple diamond band I stopped wearing years ago after replacing it with the larger family ring chosen by his advisors and publicists. You once told me you liked this one better, he said softly. Because it felt real. I stared at the ring while emotion climbed painfully into my throat. Adrian looked at me carefully then. No arrogance. No control. Just honesty. I spent most of my life believing love made men weak, he admitted quietly. Then you left. And suddenly everything strong about me disappeared anyway. Tears burned my eyes instantly. Adrian stepped closer one final time before holding the velvet box gently toward me. I am not asking you to come back because of contracts or appearances or obligations, he whispered. I am asking because somewhere along the way you became the only place that ever felt like home to me. Snow melted softly against my cheeks while the city blurred behind him. For a long moment neither of us moved. Then slowly, carefully I reached for the ring. Adrian exhaled shakily like he had been holding his breath for months. And standing there beneath falling snow in a city far away from the life that first brought us together, I finally understood something beautiful about love. Sometimes the coldest men do not learn how to love when they gain everything. Sometimes they only learn after they nearly lose the one heart willing to stay.